All right, gang. Welcome to today's workshop masterclass, Dissolve Perfectionism to Discover Creative Freedom. And that's freedom from the inside out. So I'm stoked to be joining here live with y'all today. And for those of you in the future, it's good to see you. Good to communicate across space and time. What a wild time that we live in. So I'm stoked to talk a little bit about what the topic at hand today is, which is discovering potential, discovering your deep latent potential through deconstructing some fears, dissolving perfectionism, and taking a pretty wild alternative route to freedom. So stoked to share this space with you. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So all of you here are hopefully ambitious, wild, creative humans, and I love to see that. I myself am one of those. A little bit about what to expect here. Nothing. Don't expect anything. No expectations. But if you are going to expect something, don't expect bullshit and don't expect an approach that any gurus are telling you out there on the interweb, because quite frankly, I feel like most of my mission of why I'm here showing up doing this stuff for y'all is because I'm fed up with all the bullshit that people are trying to teach out there, trying to sell you, that quite frankly just isn't everyone's blueprint. I am not interested at all in telling you my exact blueprint to live the life that I'm living, because you're not living my life. You're hopefully living yours. I want to help you create your own footsteps versus following somebody else's. So my goal is to help you laugh at how silly, but also how very real and difficult the constraints of perfectionism, the fear of failure, procrastination, and all of those things, how difficult those can feel. Because I know you, I see you. And this is all to discover that new path of creative potential, because there's so much joy that awaits you in your process beyond the constraints of fear. And I think it's in fact, I know it's your birthright to align to that, to be in that freedom, joy, and just pleasure of expressing yourself authentically without giving a damn about trying to avoid a future that you don't want to happen, or remembering a past experience that didn't quite pan out how you expected. So we're going to dive in today how to really empower yourself along this journey of actualizing your creative potential. So, yeehaw. First off, who's this dorky cowboy? I know I don't have my cowboy hat on, but here's a hilarious photograph of me in Florence. That's kind of an old identity, but still, the places that this dorky cowboy has ended up is pretty remarkable. And I have lots of stories to share with y'all, but I want to dive into a little bit about my background. I am an award-winning furniture designer. My love is designing facial objects that interact with the human form. Architecture, furniture, weird, goofy sculptures, gadgets. I love it. Anything that we get to touch and interact with, that is my area of expertise. And I'm grateful to say that it's sustaining my life. The wild creations of my mind have somehow found a way to interact with the world in a way that lets me be here with y'all, have the freedom to do so. So that's amazing. A few examples of some work that I've done under some really groovy lighting. This piece is called The Great Australian Barbecue. Just, I'm so grateful that I'm able to use my creativity as a vessel to help other people feel empowered to share their creativity with the world. And I've been through all of the processes that, keep us from feeling confident in doing so. So that's why I'm stoked to share some examples of what's possible when we just kind of step beyond that and start expressing ourselves. But alas, despite me showing you these examples, despite the accolades that I've been able to achieve in my life, I am not perfect. Nobody's perfect, and the goal is not to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. The outside never tells the true story. We see so much of what we think that we want on the flashy metrics and what people share on social media, and what people the identity that people presume themselves as when they're out in the public, but that never tells the full reality of what's going on internally, what that inner landscape is telling. And that's really where the core of today's discussion is going to live. So baked into that cake, we have the anxiety of being seen. This is something I've deeply struggled with, knowing that I have potential, but really fearing stepping up into sharing that with the world. It scares me to death. I've gotten better, but it still is there. this love-hate relationship with perfectionism. On the one hand, perfectionism shows that you really, really care. But on the other hand, it shows that you have deep concern for all of the negative potential what if scenarios that might occur that ultimately keep you separate from doing the work that you want to do and having the impact that you want to have. And then within all of that is that deep-seated belief of inadequacy. I'm not good enough. I'm not ready enough. Whatever the insecurity du jour is, I know that full well, and it's very human. Everybody struggles with that. And today that's what we're going to be talking about. So I understand that struggle intimately. I'm still there and I've come a long way, but I feel empowered enough to be able to talk about this process to where I can help you reveal your own limitations and help you feel resourced to reconcile those and become more empowered. So a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. We're going to define perfectionism. We're going to dive into the control mechanisms, the super juicy stuff that arise from that behavior of perfection, being a perfectionist. We're going to debunk what I call future-based concern, because this is a huge limitation I see in so many lives of highly ambitious people. As always, we're going to look to language, because that really is the lock and the key to you discovering freedom and for you being able to become more of the person that you know you are capable of being. We're going to rewire that shit. I hope that we can say that. This is private. So we're going to gain access to deeper creative potential. You'll have a couple tools and techniques of how to get to that place. And so then we're going to embody freedom and live one hell of a life, because that's what you came here to do, isn't it? So let's dive in, baby. Yeah. You'll see a lot of awesome powers gifts. And for those that have seen some of my presentations before, yes, there will be repeats. I already forgot the number that we're on, so let's call it 2.75. We're going to talk about perfectionism. Essentially, this is this strive to have complete control of external circumstance. And as many of you may know, it's exhausting, futile, and ridiculous. There's no way you can manage the entirety of the world happening around you, but you can create a new way of relating to it. So instead of having to have complete, have your arms and tentacles out and everything and making sure they're perfect and meeting your standards, we can flip that on the script and learn how to create a relationship that is expansive, empowering, and not dependent on circumstances going your way. So one step back, it's normal. We all do this. It's going to arise at whatever point in your journey you are, regardless as if this is your first time wanting to look through some of these fears and some of these, behavioral adaptations, or if you're a seasoned professional who's already wildly successful in all the things, we're still going to loop into these stories. So apply grace and compassion. So perfectionism is a behavioral adaptation. It just wants control. But as I've experienced, and I'm sure many of you experience, control rarely brings us closer to what we want. It can feel like sometimes it's almost working, but we can never have enough of something that's almost working. So we are constantly on this treadmill of trying to control more, which leads us to have to control more to control the things we were already controlling, which is exhausting, futile, and ridiculous. So we're going to try to get beyond that. And then to do so, we need to learn a few things. We need to learn how to release control. We need to learn how to lead ourselves into uncertainty. And most importantly, to create safety and trust in our self-concept and just the idea and narrative that we hold of ourselves. Because we only try to control when there is an aspect of our self-concept that is being threatened. So we're going to try to reverse that synapse, that neurobiological pathway to save yourself. You're threatened. You need to kick into stress and fight or flight and control. We're going to rewire that to where you don't feel threatened, so that you can become more empowered in creating a way of relating instead of trying to control a way of being seen. So uncertainty. We got to talk about uncertainty. All the classic stories that everybody struggles with. What if I fail? Will I ever be good enough? Will there be another opportunity like this again? Will Maurice, my best friend from the 3rd grade, judge me if I do X, Y, Z? The existential questions that keep us up at night. I want to really draw the distinction that all of these concerns are real, but they're not true. Why? Well, where does it all live? where do those stories live? It's the future. It's this idea that sometime undefined out there will experience that potential scenario. But we're creating a relationship to it now and not in a positive way. So you can imagine how that starts to diminish our ability to be in our power and potential. And the future is not all sparkly and chrome like you might believe. The future doesn't have all your answers, and it's certainly not the promised land that's going to solve every problem you've ever had. Future-based concern. Let's dive into it. Where does the future exist? If you've met someone who's been to the future and back, please let me know, pass my contact. I'd love to have a conversation with them because I have yet to meet someone who's done that. So where does the future exist? It's only between the ears. So when we start to loop in these stories, what if I'm not good enough? What if something never comes? What if another opportunity never comes like this? What if I'm judged? We have to ask, what does that say about ourselves? If I fail, is it true that I am a failure? If somebody judges me, is it true that I am not good enough? That I am what they are saying that I am? We get these stories mixed up and muddied up. We play this what if game, but we start to think the what if game is reality. So let me explain. What if this project doesn't go according to my projections? Is it true that I'm not good enough? Is it true that failing categorically makes me a failure? So in the same way that we can use the what if game to keep us from ever taking action and feeling confident in actualizing the journey we want to actualize, what if we flipped it on its head and tied it back to finding that place inside of us where the story is categorically false? Because failing in life does not make you a failure. If things don't go exactly as planned, that doesn't mean that you don't have power. That doesn't mean that you didn't apply yourself. It doesn't mean that you're anything less than what you are. It just is. The problem is we tend to really mind circumstance and we base our self-worth on circumstance. And that's not the most sustainable path forward to living the life that you want to live. Those stories are false. If you fail, it is not true that you are a failure. If you aren't good enough to meet a goal that you set, it does not mean that you categorically are not good enough. It just shows you the areas in your life where you have room for improvement. Your performance can be a little bit more efficient, or we can learn to set more realistic goals, but it does not mean that you're not good enough. So the practice is this. Can I sit with those fears? Can I accept that potential worst case scenario? And can I embrace that I don't know all the answers and that I don't need to know all the answers? Because if you can sit with the fear of failure, and if you can accept the reality of if I apply myself and this doesn't go according to how I want, that's okay. At least I did it. And if you can trust that, hey, tomorrow is tomorrow. There's no way I can gentrify it. Can I just be okay with acting with what I know now? If you can really embrace those three things, you're going to significantly empower your own ability to actually create the future that you want to create. Paradoxically, it only comes when we detach from getting to that outcome and fully just resource ourselves now in being content with the journey. But again, this takes cultivating that safety in your body. You have to feel safe to fail. You have to feel safe enough to trust that tomorrow I don't know what's going to happen, and that can be okay. And that takes a lot of rewiring, and we're going to get into that. So your body, your expression, your narrative, all of this has to be rooted in trust. If there's no trust, there's certainly no bridge to your creative potential. So these are the mechanisms that we use to dissolve perfectionism. We need to release control, observe the future-based concerns, and we need to return to the present. Do those practices, go into the what-if game, separate, create space between you and that potential worst-case scenario, and just ask yourself, is it true? And a lot of the times we realize that we actually have no idea what's going to happen. So we really need to ground in that. We can find safety in the fact that If I don't know what's going to happen, I don't need to allocate precious energy towards concerning over all of the what ifs, all of the unseen variables and circumstances. I can just be here with what I have available to me now in one little step at a time. I can feel safe enough to take this step, to have that conversation, to share this, to express that. But all of this is run by language. So we need to look to language. That's what we're going to arrive at right now. You don't understand how language works. Now, let me tell you. Yeah, it can be painful. We go our whole lives thinking that we have a grasp, we have an idea of how language is used in our reality to get what we want or to describe what we want. But this is the key distinction. Language is not descriptive. Language is creative. And I actually like to think of it as create if fill in the blank, create conditions are met. What I mean by this is we tend to use language as a mechanism to describe. This is a terrible example, but I'm going to go for it. This is pink. This is clear cut because it's a very physical thing. This is pink. Now we can go into the idea of we can argue all day long what shade of pink it is. I'm not seeing pink, I'm seeing red. But we use language and we think we're describing this. But the energetic substance of this is just light. It's so many colors all at once. It's just vibrating at such an extreme level that it's seen continuously as pink. Now, if we want to translate that to our own thoughts and our own narrative of what we believe ourselves to be, this is where we really see that language is creative, and it's not as clear cut as this is pink, because our self-narrative is constantly informed by the words that we use. And there's only a few ways that we do it. So language is the code to the operating system that is your mind, that is your soul, that is all of these things wrapped together in this human form. This is the hardware, your body, and all this good stuff. And language is the code that operates the whole software that believes, that creates the identity structure, that creates the beliefs, that creates the thoughts and the behaviors and the patterns and the so on and so forth. What I want to do is I want to throw that operating system out the window so we can create a new way of using language in place of it. So behavior, thought, belief, identity, operating system. That's how we get back to the core of where our language is rooted in insecurity, inadequacy, and scarcity, which are the three primal fears that we all operate as. We were designed as humans to operate like that. But we're no longer quite living in the physical reality that demands that self-narrative. So when we're talking about actualizing our creative potential, it gets really, really muddy when we still operate from that place of fear. But to understand that we're operating from the place of fear, we have to go down this ladder. Why did I make that behavior? Well, I made that behavior because I thought if I don't do this now, then I'll never have the opportunity to do it again. Now, that might seem like it's a great idea, but there's a belief of scarcity there. There's a belief that there's not enough. So if I don't get it now, I'm not going to survive, essentially. But then that goes down to an underlying identity that almost doesn't feel worthy enough to have the opportunity to apply yourself, because there's something that is for you cannot miss you, whether it happens today or tomorrow or 5 years from now. There is no such thing as scarcity in the sense of applying yourself, actualizing your potential, and getting out into the world. So this reveals this identity that is rooted in something that is less than. So then that operating system must be coded in this language that is fear, that's constantly on the lookout for stimuli that are responding to scarcity. So once we get to that point, we have to work our way back up, but consciously rewiring those things, using that technique of, is it true? Is it true that I am inherently not worthy enough? Where on earth does my birth certificate say, hey, my name is Kevin Vanderzell. I was born not worthy enough? Doesn't say that on mine, and I can categorically say that it doesn't say that on yours. So when did we begin to adopt that idea? Through language, through conditioning, through experiencing the world in all the millions of ways that we had growing up. So again, apply grace and compassion. but now we need to really shine a conscious light on this unconscious behavior. So when we start to work our way back up the ladder and start to rewire our way of relating to ourselves, so the way that we relate to ourselves through language, we can shift into a different identity, create different beliefs, that create different thoughts, that create different behaviors. When we learn how to do that, which we will, we learn that underneath it all is pure possibility. And that's the real place, the real operating system that we are returning to, that I believe is the default. When you were a child and you were playing with crayons and this and that, you were in a world of pure possibility because nobody told you that you weren't good enough. Nobody said that you were less than. Nobody judged you until they did. And then you learn to adopt that idea as your own, and then goes the spiral of the insecurity, scarcity, and inadequacy. So we've all been there. I could say it with a little bit of a chuckle because it's a thing that every single human can relate to. And we need to kind of shake it out and invite in a little bit of levity from time to time, because that looseness allows us to go into the story without that kind of firm memory of maybe the pain associated with it. So if you want to talk about really the role of language, it's the direct expression of your identity. Basically, there's only two principles at play. It's I am not. It's the old paradox of duality and non-duality. I think it's a pretty quantum idea. Most of who we construct ourselves to be is very course corrective. I am this, I am not this, I am this, I am not this. And we kind of just vibrate between some middle point. But again, as we can say, as we can return to what we were talking about earlier with how we use language to create, we're constantly creating different ideas of ourselves all the time and everywhere. And so who we are is constantly changing, and we need to use that as a beautiful opportunity to harness that momentum and that change in a way that aids our expansion and aids our creativity. Versus for the most part, people tend to just vibrate more and more down into the old, deeply ingrained neural pathways that are rooted in the fear. And so we all struggle with this, but there is a way beyond this. So we can rewire that. And it sounds taboo and cliche, but it's very simple when we understand the principles of language. So if we're going to talk about perfectionism being like this control mechanism, imperfectionism, which is who we are as humans, we are perfectly imperfect because we're all so different. It's the transformation from fear to freedom. So we need to use language in a way that's no longer rooted in fear, but then becomes an expression of freedom. That's where power lives. So 99.9% of our operating systems, I would even say 100, are driven by fear. But there is an alternate operating system available to us. We can find remnants of that in cultures all over the world. We can go to ancient Eastern Vedic traditions where you have gurus transcending the parameters of time and space. And then you can even have like all of the Western occult knowledge and native knowledge and all of that speaks to finding this deeper operating system, this deeper way of being that doesn't need to control. That's not looking for circumstance to validate a feeling of not enoughness. One that is completely empowered just by being present. Because so much of our fear comes from a distorted relationship to time. And we'll get to that in a moment. So fear we can view as the source code that keeps us separate from our creative potential. That's what we're going to dive into. So we need to reconcile past feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, and scarcity. As I said many times, these are the three basic primal fears that we all have experienced and all avoid experiencing again. So it's the not good enough, not ready enough, not worthy enough. You can see how these start to create those, everyone talks about the limiting beliefs. These three primal fears derive the three primal limiting beliefs of hopelessness, helplessness, and worthlessness. So you can call this literally the perfectionist. What the perfectionist tries to create is a reality where all of the conditions are controlled. And then and only then will the perfectionist feel good enough, worthy enough, and ready enough when you're in a hermetically sealed vacuum where you have complete and total clarity of what's going to happen. But that's not what life is like. And so we can't expect to engage in the world as a creative. We can't expect to share our work with the world in a hermetically sealed container. There's all sorts of variables, and that's the spice of life, baby. So, fun fact, what you try to avoid, you are bound to create. Enough said. These are the stairs of learning, right? We're learning stuff. I hope we are. So we're going to come back to time, like I was saying. So we all have a distorted relationship to time. We tend to live everywhere but here and now. Earlier, I posed the question, where does the future exist? All those future-based concerns are in some hypothetical scenario that hasn't happened yet. Yet how much of our energy that's precious to us do we spend outsourcing it to those moments that are fictitious? So long as we are always outsourcing our energy to the future, we're never really using that energy that belongs to us. But there's really one key reason why we look to the future to avoid something. It's because we're trying to avoid repeating a past experience. We all have past pain. Everyone has trauma. Everyone has a whole gamut of conditions and circumstances that led them to be exactly as they are, and all of the beautiful imperfections and all of the not so beautiful parts of your identity. But we only try to avoid a hypothetical scenario of the future because we've experienced it before. So we are relating to the past while trying to avoid a future, and we're never here. And it sounds, again, it can sound like it's some esoteric principle, but just take a moment of keen discernment and check in with, how much am I fully present with myself without thinking about what's going to happen next or what just happened? And I'm not saying in the sense of go and meditate and not have any thoughts. Like, that's not the answer. We're living in a contemporary integrated world. And I do think that that's a really healthy path to integrate all parts of yourself, not just compartmentalize. The answer is not a cabin in the woods, and the answer is not the monastery in the mountains for most people. So we need to learn that it's safe to fully accept what's happened, and it's safe to not know what will happen. And then something magical happens when we come into that present tense. So again, we spend so much energy trying to avoid that future. The future ain't real, G. So let's talk about empowerment as a binomial. Standard math equation. I like math, so I like to return to this. X plus Y equals Z. So complete acceptance for what was, plus release of concern for what will be, is where your creative potential lives. And you realize that that's actually like a pretty narrow margin because it's just now. And it's just now, and it's just now. So as we relate to language, we can think of language in our thought space, how we're always going to thoughts that connect us to memories, that connect us to stories, or thoughts that connect us to the dreams that we have. And we're using language to relate to all of these things because that's the code that goes through all parts of your being. But we use language so much to the extent that we are overloaded with information. We're overloaded with constantly remembering our past experiences and constantly dreaming for something that hasn't happened yet, that we're using language to completely take us out of the here and now, because we're talking about the I should, I could, I would have, I wish. We're constantly digging up stories using language in the past, and we're constantly trying to create stories of the future that haven't happened yet. Again, this is normal. We do this millions of times a day. Maybe not millions, but we do this so many times just in a day. And the key is just to realize that those thoughts are okay, but that language is only reinforcing that operating system that's keeping you from being fully present. When we're constantly remembering and using language to relate to our past, we're reinforcing that pathway. And most of our relationships to the past have a lot of muck and ick inside of them. And it's not to reject the past. It's not to disassociate from it. It's just to create full acceptance. Because when we don't have full acceptance for what was, we tend to use language, I should have done it this way, or if I could do it again, I would have done it like this. But to put in the beautiful words of Peter Crone, whatever happened, happened, and it couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't. And it can be really crude, but it can be so liberating at the same time. Because the only place that I am is here and now. And if I can't come into complete harmony with that, I'm just going to be carrying all of that resistance, all of that tension from the past that just keeps me separate from where I am. So if we want to think about physiologically what happens, if this is where I am in time and space, but I am completely in disharmony with that and not accepting that, where's my power? If I can't accept that I'm sitting here talking to you right now, how do I expect to be fully resourced to create to the best of my abilities, to share my work with the world and to impact the people that deserve to be impacted? If I'm in resistance to something that already happened, I'm just prolonging my ability to actually come into who I'm supposed to be. So I know that's a lot, but again, this is the equation for creative potential actualized, for those that actually want to actualize their potential. So where am I still in resistance to what happened? Where am I controlling circumstance to avoid repeating that same scenario? If I had a scenario in the past where I started singing and dancing and it felt so good and somebody shut me down and I've harbored resentment and tension and insecurity around that, and I just wish that I could go back and change that story. It's a very real human thing that I'm sure so many people have struggled with. But if we've never come into full acceptance of that, we're going to spend our whole life trying to avoid repeating that. So we're never fully right here in this moment, never fully able to be in that authentic, liberated singing and the dance and energy, because we're never going to play big and we're never going to use our voice, because the only way we're relating to it is through our past experience. And that past experience creates the thing we're trying to avoid. You can see how exhausting and how silly this can be, but it's also sad because we need to be compassionate about how this limits so many of us. So again, I think I could talk about that for hours and hours and hours, but I think that alone will get you going. I'm excited to maybe do a deep dive on that another time. But to become fully resourced, it's those two prerequisites. You no longer resist accepting the past, and you finally release the desire to control and release all that future-based concern. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't care about what's going to happen. It just means that we can drop all of the anxiety. We can drop all of the attachment to outcomes. We can drop all of the existential crises that are purely psychological that we place upon our journey. And so we can feel that there's so much freedom that can enter our body. It's like finally taking a full exhale, like, and we can realize, wow, like I didn't know how much energy I was storing in my system. Now, I know as much as this is just a really quick overview of what's happening, these are all practices that you can do on a daily basis to really inquire. And the practice is just the question, where am I in resistance? Where am I in control? And just let that be the doorway. This is the double-edged sword. The resistance, the control, as much as they are the limitations, they're also the doorway. So to collaborate with these densities, I like to call them, the density of fear, anxiety, all of those things, that's to realize that your potential lives just beyond the threshold of these fears. And that's where life gets really interesting, when you step up and you say to yourself and to life that, like, I'm ready to move through these fears, not over them, common language, overcome them. You're not hopping the fence. You're integrating them so that they're no longer rooted in the density of inadequacy, scarcity, and insecurity, but you collaborate and move through the fear to integrate it to where they completely change form and change shape. So the way that you relate to them is no longer something that is crippling, but something that can be a doorway to expand. So again, care is greater than concern. Creation is greater than control. And there was a third, but I'm drawing a blank and I'm still not. I was hoping I was going to remember it by now. It was going to be on the nice C alliteration. But integration is greater than information in all of this. So this can be information to you, or it can be an opportunity for you to inquire and integrate some of these principles and ideals into your own life. There's no one size fits all, because the question that you ask yourself will take you on your own personal journey. And I hope that it does. But please don't let this just be another example of you consuming information to store in some portion of your brain that's never going to be used. Because we all have so much just floating around in our consciousness. I think I heard the other day that the average human consumes comparatively like 356 newspapers worth of information every single day, which is just blasphemy to talk about. And even if I butchered that, still, imagine reading the entire newspaper front to back in a day. You'd probably feel exhausted. Well, with podcasts and radio and TV and YouTube and social media and all these things, we're literally taking in hundreds of newspapers a day. And so it's like, okay, let's create a little separation. No wonder why I think I need to have all the answers, because I have access to all the information. But that's just a treadmill that's never going to end. In the same way that collaborating with fear, uncertainty, doubt, all of those things starts with a simple question, integration is the same thing. Where can I release resistance? Where can I step into more of my power through releasing control? And let those questions be doorways in and of themselves. So I want this to be transformational for you, but I can't force you to put this into practice, to ask yourself those questions and to transform. But I can be the messenger. Just don't shoot the messenger if you don't end up doing it. So you have the process. Look for resistance, control, and concern. Anywhere where there is separation preventing you from being present, use those as the doorways. Why do I resist taking a picture of this piece of furniture I made and sharing it on social media? Why do I resist that? Well, perhaps I have a fear of judgment, definitely. And perhaps I fear judgment because I feel like I'm actually not as good as other people. So I compare myself, definitely. And perhaps I compare myself because I haven't cultivated that radical trust in my process that I deserve. So I can use that as a doorway to learn, oh, I resist because there's an opportunity for me to learn that I can cultivate more trust in who I am, which will then in turn cultivate more safety in my expression and more safety in me being able to step up and show up authentically and do what I want. Because it's so silly when we realize that the thing that's preventing us from doing what we want in our lives is usually a really small physical example. Like, I'm worried about what Tom will say, or Maurice from third grade, or I'm worried that no one's going to show up, or whatever it is, That's okay. We have to learn to accept that, but we can use those as doorways to go in to those deeper stories that are just asking for love. Where there's lack, it's just asking for us to apply love. If we don't feel ready enough, it's just asking us to step into like, hey, like, you don't need to be qualified, you just need to be called. And if you're called, that's good enough. And if you don't feel worthy enough, like, that's real. Sit with that and feel where that sits in your body, but realize like you don't have to do anything to be worthy. You already are, and so on and so forth. So what are the stories that support them? Again, the language story that supports these fears, that supports these mechanisms, it's code. So if we can retrace our steps through that code, we can tweak it and rewire it and even just kind of rip it out entirely if it doesn't serve us anymore. If you're one who wants to take the cold turkey quantum approach, you can just be like, I'm never gonna say the phrase I should ever again, because I should is a phrase that creates shame and guilt, and I talk a lot about that. We can go into that another time. But if you're someone's like, I'm just gonna try to eradicate that phrase, like, amazing, go for it. You also realize how difficult it is, because you'll just unconsciously say that all the time, which is unconsciously shaming yourself, which is unconsciously creating separation between accepting where you are. Because if you believe that you should do something other than what you're doing, you're not in full acceptance. You believe that you're doing something wrong, and you're, again, just disempowering yourself through time. because the only place you can be empowered is here and now. So long as you are trying to avoid something that hasn't happened yet or believe that you should be doing something other than what you are, you're only reinforcing that program. Again, it takes a lot of grace and compassion to start, but then we can start to get honest with ourselves and get a little radical. Everyone moves at their own pace, but it's possible to deconstruct those stories at whatever pace feels right. Use the "is it true" framework. When we get to the end of a story that leads us from I'm scared to show up because what if I get judged, and what if I fail, and what if I don't meet X goal, and what if I don't make Y amount of money, blankety blank blank. Well, is it true that you're not good enough? Is it true that none of that was worth it? And we find that the answer is categorically false. This is one of the most powerful and simple practices that I try to impart upon everybody. Whenever we start to entertain a story that sits in your body with it closes your shoulders because it's dense and because it's rooted in not enoughness. Is it true? And it's that deep exhale energy. Oh, it's not true. But I need the constant reminder because I'm not supposed to always be in the perfect awareness because I'm an imperfect being, imperfectionism. It's giving yourself grace and realizing it's always going to pop up. Those stories rooted in fear are going to arise. Just ask, when I recognize them, can I ask, is it true? And can I follow that down and come to that little divine chuckle and say, oh no, it's not. Okay, great. Now how can I move forward in more of my power and awareness, knowing that I am enough? So a lot of this has to do with reconciling past experience. Going back in time through our thought space, which is through our language and our code, that's acts that we use to access those memories. Go back to those past experiences and sit with yourself. Now, depending on your existential plate, these can be minute, these can be extreme, but just allowing yourself to sit with those things. Now, I'm talking in this sense in creative potential, in expressing yourself authentically, not going down the route that is, more trauma-based, but this is from the place of the times where I tried to step into my creative potential and my authentic expression, and I was met with a reflection that was not coming from my own pure freedom. I was coming from somebody else's story of fear or some conditioning that was floating around me or some judgment that I adopted as my own. To reconcile that experience is to go and sit with yourself, to really see how that happened and to accept it fully, to breathe with it, but to stop resisting being okay with that, because whatever happened, happened, and it couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't. Peter Crown again. Now, when we relate to the future, to become empowered, we have to detach our self-worth from all the outcomes. But our outcomes that we try to create are largely attached to the past we're trying to not repeat. So we're already in avoidance energy. So we're already putting our self-worth on the line. And we can eliminate that fully when we just learn that if I can be resourced and present with myself, release that control, release that future-based concern, and to try my best to be as present with what is available to me right now, which is usually who you are and the clarity on the next step you should take. That's usually what we got. If we can be okay with that and just surrender to that, what is it? That hand of cards that you're dealt in that moment. That's how you actually really bolster your self-worth, because you're not placing it on meeting a goal. You're just sitting with your own sense of worthiness to do what you're doing right now, to be with yourself right now. So in that empowerment of not relating to the future through fear and not resisting accepting a past, ask yourself the question, what becomes available? To me, it's only one word, and I'll let you answer that for yourself. But to me, what becomes available is freedom, and in specific, creative freedom. If I'm not worried about being judged or failing, or if I have nothing to prove, if I just want to express myself in this now moment, I'm free to do so. I can be as free as a bird as I want to. But if I'm relating to this, I really want to do this, but I'm afraid of X, Y, Z, B, theta, Q, your creativity is going to reflect that energy of fear. And you can rewire that and find a different process. So the ultimate teacher is life. So as you are integrating this, as you are hopefully stumbling and tripping and saying, fuck, this is super hard, at the same time as you're like, wow, like that's really powerful. Like I don't have to attach my self-worth. No, it's not true that I'm not good enough, that if I fail, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to learn. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to fuck up some more. And I'm going to do it all over again, because that's the process of being a human. There's no perfection here. So there's no sense in being a perfectionist. We're just going to be open to life and not mind what happens too much. We're going to learn from circumstance, but we're not going to control it. We're not going to base our happiness on it. We're just going to become empowered with what we have here and now, which is you, your creativity, and pure possibility. So all of that is freedom, baby. So imagine what would become available to you when you shift from fear into freedom. I'd say it's a world of pure possibility where authenticity and creative expression become the default, where that line between what is and what could be has a clear bridge drawn across it, because creative expression is the way that we bridge from nothing into something, from here to there, but all in the series of present moments, without going back into the past and without projecting into the future. Creativity is how we create more of the life that we know is possible. So, yeehaw! Kev, this is next level. What can I do next to embody freedom beyond perfectionism and create my wildest reality? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I have an offer for you. So this is my newest experimentation. My offer to you is dissolve perfectionism and become a more creatively liberated version of you so that you can ship your best work yet in just 90 days. You'll be supported at every step of the way, and the process will involve nothing short of what we talked about: cultivating safety, trust, and freedom in your creative expression so that you can step up, play big, and live more of the life that you know is possible and impact the people that deserve to be impacted by your creative work. I'm not going to go through everything, but down to the brass tacks of what this will be. It's a 12-week program limited to 6 people. It's going to be a highly creative container. It's going to be a creative incubator where everyone in the program is going to have some project, some idea, some dream that they are wanting to ground into reality and make happen. So by the end of this program, you're going to be embodied and confident and clear and connected to what that vision is, and be guided through the process of getting it out into the world with all the support along the way from the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. Start date is January 24th, right after my 27th birthday. Group calls twice a week. First call is inside integration, then a Q&A. We'll finalize everything once enrollment closes on the 23rd. Ongoing 24/7 support in Telegram. You'll have access to all the resources. And you, because you're special and you're receiving this, will get 2 personal coaching calls with me, even though every week will be your chance for something like that. I don't like, how all the gurus are like, this is $57,000 and today it's free. It's like, no, it's bullshit. I believe in investment. This is going to be a 12-week container, and it's going to be highly transformative. And it's going to help you get from literally not feeling confident enough to share your work to having something tangible in the world. Whether if you're a musician, it's an album. If you're an artist, maybe it's you booked a show and you got all the pieces done. If you're a designer, maybe it's you made a web design agency and you're wanting to get work out there and you got a project. Or if you're like me and you're a furniture designer, you're making products and you're shipping them to the world, and you're actually collaborating with what life is telling you to collaborate with, which is your creativity and impact on the world. So the price for you all is $1,000. I'm going to raise it in a few days when I make it available to the public. If you're interested, you'll get an email right after this that'll have all the details. To make it really easy, I want to do weekly payments. I'm into that. So $90 a week for the next 12 weeks for creating safety in your body, trust, and radical acceptance for your gift and getting it out into the world. So that sounds like something you're interested in. You can learn a lot more. You can feel free to send me an email, any questions you might have. But that, my friend, is the end of that. So at this moment, I would love to open up for some questions and just talk to you guys, whatever you have to say. I would love to just start going back and forth on what resonated with you all, what you're currently going through, what's getting you stoked and excited about life. So give it to me, baby. And if not, that's okay too.
I guess. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. As I was saying to you in our inbox just the other day, started going through. I found it so helpful when I noticed all these worries and future concerns and this doubt and uncertainty and fear all bubbling up inside me. I had these really intense moments recently where this was like, just felt like it was gripping my whole body. And I just thought this is not fun. And so I went and did a little bit of journaling about it. And as I was journaling, I asked myself those exact questions. I just realized, wait a minute, I'm projecting this all into a future that doesn't even exist. And then I just asked myself that question. Is it true? And I just thought, no. And that's such a nice relief that washed over me in that moment as I realized this. And I thought, oh, it's all in my head. And like that just kind of released all that tension. And yes, and like I've even used the kind of the mindset of being okay with being imperfect with just other little things I'm doing throughout my day. There was a poem I wrote for my brother at his wedding a couple months ago, and while I'm here visiting my family over the holidays, I wanted to write that out on a piece of paper for him and give it to him and his wife so they could just keep it, for memory's sake. And I had this little thought, it's like a bit of resistance to doing that because I was like, and then I realized like, oh, that's just a fear of it not being perfect enough. I wanted to make sure it was looked really nice and was really beautifully handwritten and all this and that because it's their wedding and it's important. And I was like, dude, just get it done. Like, just write it down. It's like they're gonna be appreciative of the fact that I took to do it and wrote it out for them so that they could keep it more than they care about it being perfect. So yeah, having little moments like that has been really helpful.
Yeah, mate, it's so true. It's when you tell a kid to go play or you just witness kids playing, they need so little conditions to be met to be Maria, that's okay. Thank you so much for coming. I see you. Enjoy. Good luck at work, and looking forward to connecting with you more. You know, when we observe children playing, there's nothing, they don't need to meet any conditions in order to have fun. You give a kid a freaking rock and they're like, this is the best soccer ball ever. And they're kicking it. I was I spent a lot of time in Morocco when I was living in Europe, and I would surf there a lot. And to get to some of these surf breaks, you had to go to the gnarliest terrain. And the region of Morocco I was in was super mountainous. And there would be these soccer fields at the top plateau of a mountain with the goalposts on either end without nets on top of a mountain. So they could never have a soccer ball because you score a goal and you have to scale down 3,000 feet to go grab it. So it's like, there's no way. These kids would find literally anything, a cereal box, an old piece of scrap rubber tire, whatever it is, and they would kick it and they were playing and they were still yelling and having so much fun. But like if adults were to do that, they're like, oh, I better make sure I have the best pair of Nikes on. And the new 2024 soccer Cristiano Ronaldo jersey came out. I'm going to get that. We have to do all these things in order to feel confident enough to get out there and play. But it's like, yeah, like it shows you care, but it is the limitation because it's actually you just being concerned and placing conditions on you just expressing yourself. So we can all return to that. It's like, hey, I want to be perfect and send this to my I think, did you say it was your brother's wedding or your sister's wedding? um I care a lot,
Yeah,
but also it
my
doesn't need to
brother.
be. It's me caring about making this perfect isn't helping it be any better, so I can just express it, and the heartfeltness will be in the letter
Mm,
regardless. They're not going to be like, oh, I could tell you used the most
mm,
expensive pen, and you must have taken a long time on the letter. Just saying, hey, I love you, you're amazing, like that's more than enough.
yeah. Mm, mm.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah, and I just signed it at the end, with love from Milky, which is like the nickname my siblings have called me since I was a kid. So
Milky. That's great, man. Yeah, I love hearing stuff like that because it is so simple. Like, and we think something like this, it's easy to translate like a conversation like this into like the huge things in life. Like, oh, I've had this, I really want to like do this huge thing, and that's definitely you're going to experience limitation, but it's in the little everyday nuance. Like even just, what clothes am I going to wear? And then sitting in front of the mirror. And again, none of that's wrong, but there's two ways of relating to yourself. Are you relating to yourself, keep changing your jacket and your hat because you're afraid of somebody judging you, or you're not feeling embodied enough? Or are you doing it because you love the joy of expressing yourself? It's like the water can get really muddy, but most of the time it comes from us trying trying to control perceptions, circumstance, and all these other things. So yeah, I resonate, man. That's so beautiful. It's like writing a whole letter just to scratch it all out and then just saying at the very end, like, love you. Like that's almost like more heartfelt. I could use these
mm,
words, but I
mm,
don't need them.
mm.
Yeah. Well, it's good to
Yeah,
see y'all faces.
it's cool.
Yeah. Anjay, is there if I'm saying that right, is there anything you want to say, any questions or any thoughts? I'd love to hear any feedback you might have or any ideas that are popping up.
Uh, yeah, no questions. I really like the presentation. It's great. It really resonates with what I do. So I really enjoyed it, and it brought up some stuff that I did not really enjoy it, but it released. So yeah, really thank you for putting this together. Yeah,
Of course. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. What an honor.
yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, the three of you, so good to see your faces. It's so nice to know that I'm not in space alone, just speaking out to the future. A lot of the times that's how it is. But yeah, super good to share this space with y'all. And hopefully, yeah, you should all be getting an email. Maybe I think it's tomorrow or something like that with steps to keep the conversation going and moving forward. Anjay, if I can ask, where did you sign up for this workshop from?
I saw, I saw. I don't know. Are you in Danko's
Mhm.
like this digital what he has?
Yeah,
I saw. I think in the Discord you posted.
cool,
And
sweet,
there's a
good to know.
follow. Yeah.
Righto. Gosh, amazing stuff. All right, gang. Well, I think that concludes it for me. If we can end it there, let's all do a nice little breath in and shake out and super excited for what's coming. Yeehaw. Ah, all right, gang. See you
Woo!
soon. You.
Bye bye. Have a good day or
Ciao.
night, guys.